Good morning and welcome. You're listening live to Heart, a program which aims to help you understand and to become your loving self. I'm Dr. Mitra Rashidian. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sexologist in full-time private practice in beautiful Encino, California. I'm here to invite you to join us along with my wonderful friend and colleague, Dr. Robert Jaffe. Good morning.
Good morning. I am Dr. Robert Jaffe. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified hypnotherapist, specialized in addictions and trauma. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is addictions, codependency, and trauma. And I'm here to share with you some of what I've learned and some of what Dr. Rashidian and I have learned together about how to feel more loving and joyful every day of our lives.
Beautiful.
We dedicate this program to you, our listeners, and those of you who are watching us. And we want to let you know that you do contain within you everything you need to feel happy, joyous, and free. You go, how is that possible? Well, it's the way we're born. We're born into the world as our loving, authentic, true selves. And we come in open, curious, honest. We are all honest when we come in here, sexual, as well as trusting. And we also have the capacity to be calm, emotionally available, and connected with others, as well as confident and compassionate.
Well, it's interesting that the way you say it so calm, makes me feel calm every time I listen to that. And I'm usually on a hyper side myself a little bit. So please join us. Our phone number live here is 951-922-3532. And you can also watch us on YouTube at heart-2-heart.online/YouTube. So this is start, another amazing program. Dr. Jaffe, Dr. Robert, we said we're going to be talking about addictions and codependency and
Yes.
denial, which all go in the same, frame here.
Yeah. So I'll start off by saying that human beings have two main facets to them, to us as a human being. The human part, which is the part that is grounded in time and space and has a body, and that body can be hurt, that body can be killed, and so we come into the world with a great deal of power in terms of protecting ourselves. We want to be safe. We want to be safe for that human part of us. And that part is regulated by our egos. Our egos are here to help us to stay safe. And everybody wants to stay safe, right? We all want to live in a relaxed, safe manner. And that part of us is very, very powerful. And then the being part of us is the other side of being a human being. That part of us is also very powerful. That part of us is our spirit. That's the energy that we have that makes some bodies walk around and other bodies just lie there still. That being part of us is a spirit. It's an energy. It's consciousness itself. And it vibrates at a certain frequency depending upon how aware we are. And that part of us is not grounded in time and space. That part of us is like all energy. There's no beginning and no end to it. Everything is composed of energy, including our bodies, and anything that, and Einstein proved that energy and matter are interchangeable. So that when our bodies are gone, the energy that configured our bodies is no longer in our bodies, but it is still around. Where it is, that's debatable, but it's still there. The energy is not destroyed. We know that. Some of us, including myself, believe that we are eternal beings, and that love is the place where we are aware of our eternal nature. So, if you want to say that we have two sides to us, one side is the human, and that is mediated by being careful and being afraid. If we are afraid, then we can negotiate things that can destroy us, right? We can be aware if something is dangerous and we can avoid it. If someone is attacking us, we can draw upon our strength and run away or fight back. And so that part of us that's human is mediated by being careful or fear. Fear is the thing that drives us, and that's the ego. And then the other part of us, the spirit or the heart or the soul, whatever you want to call it, that part of us is the part of us that loves, and that's the part of us that cares about connection with other people. That's the part of us that feels grateful. That's the part of us that is kind. Mm-hmm. And so, what has this got to do with addictions?
That was my question. I was going to ask you. I mean, this is such a beautiful, velvety, philosophical description of how human being is made up,
Mm-hmm.
collectively, right? And the way you describe it, I'm a human being myself, but now I'm looking at it as this amazing structure, that how beautifully and how cleverly it has come together and made us who we are,
Mm-hmm.
because based on what you're saying, that's how I can see, and I hope that our listeners and our viewers can see how we are the same at the same time. We are different.
Right. Well, we're all more the same than we are different.
Right.
Yeah, and I learned that at a very young age. When I was a kid, I used to love science fiction movies, and then I would see, people from outer space coming down with 3 heads and four limbs. Four limbs, 4 arms, 4 legs.
Right.
And 12 noses and looking totally different. And I go, oh, that's what a real alien is.
Right.
They are alien to us. And we are actually all the same. We all have pretty much the same features, and we're all built pretty much the same. And yet somehow we find the small differences so important that we're willing to fight and die over them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So with all the sameness that we have,
Mm-hmm.
and with some differences that we have, we see that how that shapes us into a person that we become, right? We have different outlooks, we have different way of feelings our feelings, we have different way of looking at situations, make our own interpretations of what's going on, and therefore some of us are naturally in a happier place than the other ones, right?
Yeah. So again, the human being is composed of the ego and the spirit, and the ego is about physical survival, and so it has a lot of fear attached to it.
Right. Right.
And fear is our birthright, and that's where we come from in terms of our origin. When we came onto this planet, survival was something that we had to fight for. Food wasn't given to us. Safety from our environment wasn't given to us. And so people walked around trying to create food and safety for themselves, and they were mostly focused on the ego and the fear to do that. Right? And so we are all evolving, and as we evolve on a day-to-day basis, most people, at least in the Western world, are not so focused on having to survive from a day-to-day basis. Although, from an evolutionary standpoint, most of us feel as though we are still working for survival, and we act as though everything is about survival.
You know, what you say just, reminded me. I just made this visual observation in my mind myself just now.
Mm-hmm.
That what you're saying is so true. That fear is such a unique, huge, and exceptional drive that we have. That feeling that we have. I mean, in earlier days, millions of years ago, the method of survival was not just limited to believing in ourselves that we can take care of ourselves. So we started making weapons made out of stone, made out of wood. And as human beings evolve, we see that the nature of external protecting factors,
Right.
weapons and guns and all of that started to develop.
Mm-hmm.
So that means during our evolution, actually our fear not only has not been able to diminish with all the knowledge that we gain about being a human and being, how to live in the world, right? We actually fear has increased, and that's maybe that's why we have now all these sophisticated weapons and all these sophisticated ways of attacking, nations, and people carry gun because the fear is even stronger these days.
Well, I don't know.
Well, that's what I just saw in my mind.
Yeah. I don't know if it's stronger. I don't know if it's stronger. I don't know if it's the same. I don't know if it's diminished. Because
definitely it has evolved at a different level.
Well, we become more sophisticated in the way in which we deal with our fear, which is to create bigger weapons and more organized armies. In that way, we are more sophisticated scientifically. I don't know in terms of a human being if we have evolved, in a way where we have less fear, the same fear, or more fear. That I don't know. But I do know that fear is a big motivator in the world, and that's what drives a lot of us.
Exactly. I mean, the reason I'm saying that in the old days, at the beginning of creation of human or much earlier years, people didn't have all this information that we have today.
Right.
The information was limited to their surrounding area.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
their focus was on just create safety within their surrounding area.
Right.
But now we have all this information globally. So then probably that's why we're looking into more sophisticated concepts of how to take care of ourselves. We are getting close to our commercial break.
Oh, we are.
So when we come back, we're going to continue to discuss how these are all related to forming addiction as a result of fear. So see you back within a few minutes. Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Heart to Heart program at KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio. For those of you just tuning in, our discussion for this segment is about addictions, denial, and codependency. And we went through some evolutionary process of that to see how the whole concept starts. And so our phone number is 951-922-3532. Please join us and ask your questions. And if you don't feel comfortable to come, online live, please contact us privately. We are happy to discuss your question and help you with that. And you can also watch us on our YouTube at heart-to-heart.online/YouTube. And we're going to give the mic to Dr. Robert to tell us more about addiction, codependency, denial, and fear, and ego. And my God, there is so much to discuss in that area.
Yeah. So we spent the first part of the show talking about the evolution and how human beings are a combination of ego, which is fear-driven, and being, which is love-driven. The ego is the fear-driven is the most powerful between the two, and so therefore, if we want to move over from fear to love, we've got to make an effort. It doesn't come as naturally as fear. So why am I talking about this, and how is it related to addictions? Addictions are about fear. Addictions are not about love. How are addictions about fear? Well, how does the human being operate? So we get information from the world. We're born into the world, and we talked before about how we have these wonderful qualities, but then we meet other human beings, usually our caretakers, our parents, and then the rest of the world, who has been exposed to a lot of negativity, a lot of fear, due to evolutionary reasons, and from their parents and from their parents' parents, et cetera, et cetera. And so we get a lot of fear messages. And so when we get a lot of fear messages, and because we want to survive, we take them on as truths, some of which are, some of which aren't, the fear messages that we get. And we store them in our subconscious mind. And then if we store them and we don't know what to do about them, we start to become anxious. Anxiety is fear, and oftentimes we're not sure why we're anxious, and we don't know what we're afraid of. But it's usually about fear messages that we got early in life, or even about fearful things that are happening right now that stimulate the fear inside of us. And when we feel fear, it doesn't feel good. We don't like it. So what do we want? We want to feel better. And so we look for things that make us feel better. And so what are those things? Those things are anything that is outside of us that makes us temporarily feel better.
And this is interesting that you're saying those things that they are outside of us.
Right.
So that means we are not able to be happy, to feel good, just by who we are.
Well, right. we learn. It's a learned thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't learn how to use our brain to make us feel better in the way that we can think about things. We look for things outside of us to make us feel better.
Right, because I guess it starts with internalized feelings and beliefs in our subconscious that we are not loving, we are not capable, we are not all the qualities that we say at the beginning of the program. That somehow I guess we lose the touch with that good qualities that we have.
Well, what happens is with our parents, we are totally dependent. Right. And so our parents are outside of us. They're not inside of us. So our parents have the ability to make us feel happy, sad, scared, whatever they want when we're very little. And so that's the beginning of dependency. Now, if our parents want us to learn how to use our own brain to feel better, they give us messages that are warm, loving messages and messages of empowerment. I know you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I know you can figure this out. Oh, have you thought about doing it this way, or that way, or another way? Tell me what you think. And so, as we start to get older, our parents start to encourage us to think for ourselves, to figure things out for ourselves. And if we're not feeling good emotionally, then they help us to learn that we can change that within ourselves. That is positive parenting. That's something that as a species we're beginning to learn more about. But for the most part, parenting has been about external things and coping, rather.
Discipline.
I'm sorry, what?
Discipline.
Discipline. Yeah. Meaning that you have to rely on me, not yourself. Right. And I know what's best, and so when people are raised in that environment of I know what's best, then it's normal for them to start looking outside of themselves for things that make them feel better.
Yeah, this is such a fascinating, I think, part of how people grow up to become an addict, because some people believe that addiction just happens.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, we know today that, per research scientifically, that addiction is an evolutionary process from and for the most part it starts from childhood.
Yes. Addiction is not a disease, although a lot of people believe that it is, and a lot of people talk about it as though it were a disease. It's not a disease in any sense of the word, because first of all, it's not transferable. If I'm an addict, I can't then transfer that addiction to you, which is part of what disease is, and it's also not a brain disorder because they haven't found any evidence that there's any malignancy in the brain that is progressive. But a lot of people frame it as a disease, and I think in a way that is disempowering to people because they feel as though they have something that they can't do anything about.
Right.
So addiction is about finding a way of reducing anxiety and finding pleasure outside of you that you and so your need to do that has to do with how much anxiety you're carrying within you and how much you need to find pleasure to change that feeling state. There's a book here that I wanted to recommend. It's an older book, but it's a very good book. It's called When Society Becomes an Addict. It's by Ann Wilson Schaef, Shaef. And she also wrote another book called Codependence and Women's Reality. And here she talks about how addiction to how the addiction to things outside of ourselves creates codependency. And codependency simply means I can't make me feel better, but I know that you can make me feel better. And so the old joke with codependency, and I've said this over and over, is codependency, in short, is when you go to bed with somebody at night and you wake up in the morning and you look at them and you say, "Good morning, how am I?" Mm-hmm. Right? Because you're looking to other people to determine whether you're okay or not.
Well, that's exactly what our parents teach us.
Yes, our parents, our parents don't focus usually so much on I don't like that behavior. It's that I don't like you when you do that behavior, right? And so I don't like you becomes something where we feel as though we're deficient and there's something wrong with us. Shame and guilt are feelings that we have that we carry inside of us, and whenever we feel ashamed and whenever we feel guilty, there's a subconscious process that includes self-punishment.
Exactly.
Now, if we're raised with a lot of shame and guilt, and we're raised with any kind of physical or emotional or spiritual abuse for that matter, spiritual abuse is simply that we use God as a way of punishing the person, and we say God won't like you, or God will hate you if you think this, or if you engage in that behavior. That's spiritual abuse, when we use God and we go, oh my God, right? How can I be thinking that? How can I be acting like that? We use that to punish ourselves, and when we're busy punishing ourselves, then we are desperate to find something that's going to make us feel better. What that thing is can vary from person to person depending upon their unique personality and character traits. And so some people gravitate towards food to make them feel better. Some people gravitate towards sex to make them feel better. Some people gravitate towards gambling to make them feel better. And many people gravitate towards smoking cigarettes. Many people gravitate towards drugs, alcohol. And those are the things that make them feel better. And do they work? Absolutely. They work, or they wouldn't use them.
Exactly.
Right? But they work as a temporary fix, right? In fact, people who use heroin call it a fix. I need my fix. Well, what is it that they're fixing? And people don't even go deep enough to ask themselves what is it that they're fixing. But what they're fixing is their discomfort, their emotional discomfort. Now, can you become...
And of course, after that, there's a physical discomfort.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If you become addicted to something that's physically addicting, then it's a physical fix as well as an emotional fix. But it begins with an emotional fix. So, going back to addictions.
And I like to see, it's amazing that people also believe that they're just going to be using once and then they're not going to get addicted to it. And then the term is, I'm not going to get hooked on it.
Mm-hmm.
However, we know that that's not how brain responds to the use of substance, right?
Well, it actually has to do. Actually has to do with the individual. There are people who can use substances and feel better periodically and not need it on a day-to-day basis, which is certainly a step up from people who do need it on a day-to-day basis. However, again, all addictions are temporary. And so then we become reliant on those things. And oftentimes, whatever we're reliant on, we need to increase it in order to get the same relief and the same good feeling. That is, unfortunately, that's the way it works. Now, what we were going to talk about today is denial. And the other thing we say in addiction recovery is denial is not just a river in Egypt, right? The Nile River, obviously. And what is denial? Denial is when we don't want to look at the truth of what's really happening inside of us. So we pretend to ourselves. Denial is pretense. We pretend to ourselves that what we're doing is okay, and then we have other people who may be codependent with us who also pretend along with us. So if the person is an alcoholic and they're married and they go on an alcohol binge and they get sick the next morning, the codependent will call up their boss and say, Johnny is not feeling well today. And Johnny then can have the day off and then go to work the next day and pretend that everything is okay. So then the codependent is in denial, even though the codependent really knows what it is. They're pretending to themselves and to the world that it isn't what it is, and allows Johnny to continue to pretend as well.
Yeah, I have heard so many, family members that they talk about, well, the drinking is not much, he or she is just having, a glass or two of wine per night. Mm-hmm. Or, no, it's not about drinking. She just gets, or he just gets angry out of nowhere.
Right.
Or, no, it's okay. We don't want anybody to know. So, or we can handle it ourselves. This is a family matter. We don't want anybody to interfere in it. And so we see that these are traces of codependency. These are what we actually promote the addict person to continue with their addictions.
Correct.
And also to, it becomes a family issue. It's not just a person issue.
Yes. So denial then is our basic way of coping with things that are very, very destructive, emotional feelings that are destructive. We pretend to ourselves that it's not as bad as it is, or that it's not bad at all. And so denial then is a way of coping. What is the first word that we usually say when we get a phone call in the middle of the night and we find out that Tommy, who is our first cousin and we've had a close relationship with, just passed away?
Oh no.
Right. Oh no. No, that can't be. Well, that's denial, right? That's the moment of denial when and why are we saying oh no?
Well, the pain is too huge for us to want to tolerate it or to even look at it.
Exactly.
Right.
So the no is a way of coping with overwhelming feelings.
Right. So
yes.
Let's just talk more about this part because this is very essential to learn about right after our commercial break.
We'll see you soon.
See you back soon. Welcome back from our commercial break. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert here at KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio. Our phone number live here is 922-3532. Please call us, join us, ask us our question. We're going to continue with Dr. Robert about the amazing topic of addictions, denial, codependency, and here we go with denial.
Okay, so we were talking before the break about denial, and denial again is a protection. We have mental protections against getting overwhelmed by strong emotions.
We always say, "Oh no, really? Oh no, I can't believe this. Oh no."
Yeah.
We use it all the time. Oh no,
Yeah, there are things in life that are so onerous that it is too much for us to handle. Certainly in one fell swoop, as they say. So we need time to adjust to things that are overwhelming. So our first defense and our most powerful defense is to pretend to ourselves that it hasn't happened, or that if it has happened, it's not as serious as we think. So that now, how is that related to addiction? So we know that people who use substances, and again, substances are anything that you ingest, right? So substance would be drugs and alcohol, food would be three of the main substances that we use. And then there's also process addictions, which would be having to do like with sex and gambling. Those would be process addictions. Cigarettes would be a substance addiction. And all addictions carry with it a lot of denial. The denial enables us to continue the addiction. And we want to continue the addiction because it makes us feel good, and we haven't discovered any other way of feeling good that works better.
And shopping also is a form of addiction.
Correct.
Compulsive shopping.
Shopping, yeah. Right. Actually, anything that we do that takes us out of our normal feeling state on a regular basis can be an addiction. That includes obsessive television watching, right? Now, are there addictions which are more destructive than other addictions? Absolutely. So is it better to have a television addiction than, let's say, a heroin addiction? Absolutely. Because the heroin addiction is something that is affecting you physiologically as well as psychologically. And the television addiction, although it does affect you physiologically, its effects are not as destructive as heroin addiction or as smoking.
One thing that my clients are telling me during this pandemic and be doing, of course, our sessions via online, they're telling me that one of the behaviors they used to have and now they're noticeably understanding it, and I've seen it that it's not happening again, was that it was the pattern of getting together with friends, and they had to start with like 2 or 3 drinks before they could even talk to each other, right? And now they're looking back and they see, what made me do that? Why did I do that, right? And then they're looking at, how much they actually had to drink before they could even become, getting engaged in a conversation, with their friends. So we don't know that, we don't realize that we actually, due to a variety of factors, we form different ways of, addictions. And then, so like you say, addiction is not just limited to alcohol and drugs. Anything that's done excessively or for a purpose of, feeling good for a moment, using an external factor to do that, it is a form of addiction.
Right. And so I'm going to answer the question, what is wrong with addictions if those addictions are not harming us physically, right? And the thing about addictions is, what addictions do is they give you temporary relief at the expense of permanent release. The emotions, the energy that is creating us, that's giving us the desire to numb ourselves and to feel better, both those things work in terms of giving us relief, because we can numb ourselves and we can feel better. but it's a temporary situation. And then as soon as the addiction wears off, we have to do it again, and again and again and again. And the problem is that as we continue to do it, our world becomes smaller, because all we want is to feel that relief and that euphoria, and everything else becomes secondary to us. And so our enjoyment of life becomes more and more narrow. And that's the biggest problem with addictions, is that our life becomes smaller and smaller. And our addictions take up more and more time and more energy to continue. So the more we focus, the more we become addicted to whatever, the less we have available to both be creative in the world and to connect with others.
Working with, the sexuality, I see that pattern in sex addiction.
Yes.
That the more they get engaged in their own ritual for their own sexual activity, right, the more disconnected they become from everything else, including family members, their relationships, and it's just, their addiction becomes the number one goal of the day, and priority, and then the more they engage in it, of course, the more disconnected they become.
Right.
And we see the complaints that from couples when they come here, and they even don't know that one has a sex addiction.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting, that they think that the husband or the wife doesn't like the other person,
Mm-hmm.
right? That they don't pay attention to me, they are into themselves, they are doing things in hiding, I'm not engaged there, they don't engage, or we're not connecting, and only to find out that one of them actually does have a sex addiction.
Yeah, and the two biggest addictions for the 21st century so far, I mean, we're just new into the 21st century, but the two biggest addictions are addiction to the cell phone, right? The iPhone, I should say,
iPhone.
not the cell. Yeah, the iPhone, and an addiction to codependence is also a big one. Yeah, I just blocked the other one.
Social media.
Well, social media is
Yeah.
is the iPhone, and I'll think of the second one. I just had it in my mind. Yeah.
It's gonna come back.
Yeah, but when we're so focused on being addicted to the computer.
Porn, you mean?
Oh,
Very
porn. That
important.
was the
Yes,
second one.
yeah.
Thank you.
Sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was it. Pornography and the iPhone. Those are the two biggest ones. And pornography is $1 billion industry.
Yes.
Yes, not $1 billion. It's a multi-billion dollar
Yeah.
industry.
That's an underestimate.
Yeah, and that's because it stimulates that part of us that goes into a euphoric state, which is a sexual state, and keeps us there. And as long as we focus on that, we don't have the energy to be creative and to connect with others in a loving, meaningful way. The same thing with the iPhone, although the iPhone is something where people are walking around looking at their phones and they're not in the moment. They're not appreciating where they are in the moment. It takes them out of the moment, and they're addicted to something else, to elsewhere. It's the addiction to elsewhere.
I mean, what I'm seeing is you're absolutely correct. At the same time, I'm listening to you, and I'm listening to myself, and I'm looking at the experiences. We see that these days, actually, this social media, pulls people into the system, because look at how, especially with the pandemic that's going on right now, if people are not part of social media, they can't do business, they can't, introduce their business, they can't say what their products, are, or how to attract, customers or clients or patients or for their businesses. So unfortunately, we see that the society and the way it is designed in right now makes people to kind of become connected to social media for surviving in terms of their businesses. I mean, it is no longer like before, where people knew about you locally, or right now you have to go sort of even global in order to survive for your business. So you, in a way, we see that the choices are limited if you don't want to go, online and be part of social network. And however, having said that, still some people, some business people, they go further away in terms of connecting to people. So I mean, I'm looking at some group of people that they have so many sites and so many connection in different set of social media that we have. We have all these new ones, and we keep getting the newer ones. And then as soon as there is a new social media, people they just jump on that, and then they introduce their products. So, and because of that, most of their time is spent there. Most of their time is spent on designing and introducing, more impressive ads, more impressive way of introducing their product. So we see that, the society actually now is promoting this addiction as a
Well,
way of surviving.
this goes to the book, the title
book
of the
that you
book,
have.
When Society Becomes an Addict.
Right.
Right. And I want to say that that what you're talking about is a danger for people.
It is.
It isn't. But I don't think that we have to become addicts in order to survive.
Well, no, we don't have to. However, the way that the competitions are set up now online, right? I see that I see the pattern of addictive behavior in some of the people that I have followed.
Mm-hmm.
To see, I mean, the minute I go in one social network that I have, for example, I see so many. The first thing that happens that their ads starts to pop, not just one, not just two, not just three, but you see suddenly, every day there is at least one new ad about them, and it's sort of a dominating.
Well, of course. We're talking, I think, about business trying to get more business,
Right.
and hook in the people who are already online.
Right.
But that's different than actual connection with a human being.
Right.
And an actual connection with a human being is not an addiction.
It's not an
So-
addiction, but when it comes to the level that makes people to stay online in order to make that connection constantly and stay away from everything else in life, that is become an addiction.
Again, people can invite us, but nobody can control us.
Right. That's for sure. Yeah.
Right. So what I want to say is each individual has to decide for themselves how much time they wish to give to any given activity, because whatever time you're giving to any given activity is time that you cannot be giving to another given activity. And how much reward are you getting emotionally from the activity that you are giving to?
Right, and see, some of what I hear is that if I don't connect, if I don't follow, if I'm not included, if I don't engage, then I'm not going to be, connecting. I'm not going to be invited anymore.
And that goes back to fear.
To fear.
To fear.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, talking. We're running out of time, I see. But talking about denial. Denial is simply a way of protecting ourselves from overwhelming feelings of hurt or fear.
Right.
And how can we protect ourselves how can we protect ourselves in the world and feel better without being addicted is the question we all need to ask ourselves. And to protect yourself from addiction means connecting with that part of you that is the spirit, that is the loving part of you, and cultivating that. And when you cultivate love, you are reducing fear. But it has to be a conscious thing. And there are people in the world who are doing that. And you and I want to believe, are amongst those who are trying to cultivate love between people. And as that happens, real love means that we're allowing the person to be who they are without judgment and without negativity.
And And expectation.
And expectation.
Right.
And that's and so the negativity and the fear and the expectation are the things that we automatically need to disconnect from.
And we will do that. And we are at the end of our program, and I would like to invite everyone to please join us next week so we can continue with this amazing topic. I promise you this is going to be the topic for next week because we just started to talk about this. And also I'd like to invite you to join us on Thursday at 3 o'clock so we can offer you another episode of Sexual Healthcare. And until then, don't forget, all you need is love.
All you need is love. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.